The last platform. The fluorescent lights of Grand Central Metro Station buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting harsh shadows across the nearly empty platform. Nina Carter shifted her laptop bag on her shoulder and checked her phone for the 100th time. 11:47 p.m. The last train to Riverside had departed exactly 7 minutes ago, leaving her stranded in the heart of downtown with nothing but regret and the lingering taste of failure. She sank onto the cold metal bench, her black blazer wrinkled from a day that had started with such promise. The Henderson account presentation had been months in the making, her chance to prove herself at Morrison & Associates. Instead, the client had walked out halfway through, unimpressed by what they called uninspired concepts. Her supervisor's disappointed face still haunted her thoughts. The platform gradually emptied as the night grew deeper. A few late commuters hurried past, their footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. Nina pulled her jacket tighter, realizing she'd have to call an expensive rideshare or figure out the complicated night bus system she'd never used before. Rough night? The voice was gentle, tinged with genuine concern rather than the pushy tone she'd learned to expect from strangers in the city. Nina looked up to see a man about her age, wearing dark green scrubs and carrying a worn leather messenger bag. His brown eyes held a warmth that seemed out of place in the sterile station environment. "You could say that?" she replied cautiously, instinctively clutching her purse closer. Living in the city had taught her to be wary of anyone who approached after midnight, no matter how harmless they appeared. He gestured toward the departure board. "Missed the Riverside Express, too. I'm James, by the way. James Rivera." He extended his hand with a slight smile. "I just got off a double shift at Mercy General. Completely lost track of time." Nina hesitated before accepting the handshake. And yeah, missed it by about 10 minutes. Work ran late." She studied his face, noting the exhaustion around his eyes and the hospital ID badge clipped to his scrubs. Something about his demeanor put her slightly at ease. "There's a coffee machine that actually works over there," James said, pointing toward a corner of the station. "Want some? It's terrible coffee, but it's hot and has caffeine. My treat. Consider it a fellow stranded commuter solidarity gesture." Despite her usual wariness, Nina found herself nodding. Maybe it was the genuine kindness in his voice, or perhaps she simply didn't want to sit alone with her thoughts about the failed presentation. Terrible coffee sounds perfect right now. As they walked toward the vending machine, Nina noticed how James moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. He fed coins into the machine and pressed buttons with practiced efficiency. "So, Mercy General," Nina said, accepting the steaming paper cup. "That must be intense work." James shrugged, settling onto a nearby bench. "Some days more than others. Tonight we had 3 car accident victims come in within an hour. But there are good days too. Last week I helped deliver a baby in our ambulance." His face lit up at the memory. Nothing quite like seeing new life come into the world. Nina found herself smiling genuinely for the first time all day. "That's incredible. I spent today trying to convince a restaurant chain that their new logo should be more approachable. Seems pretty trivial in comparison." "Hey, everyone needs good marketing," James said with a chuckle. "Even hospitals. You should see some of our community outreach materials. They look like they were designed in 1995. The conversation flowed easier than Nina had expected, their words creating a comfortable bubble in the harsh station environment. For the first time since missing her train, she didn't feel completely alone in the vast city night. Unexpected conversations. The night bus schedule posted on the grimy station wall showed the next Riverside route departing in 43 minutes. Nina had never taken public transportation this late, always managing to catch the last train or grab a rideshare before the surge pricing became astronomical. Now sitting beside James on the hard bench, she found herself oddly grateful for the delay. "So what happened at work that kept you here past midnight?" James asked, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup for warmth. The station's heating system had apparently given up hours ago, leaving them with nothing but the vending machine's warmth and their conversation. Nina hesitated, then figured she had nothing left to lose. "I bombed a major presentation today. 6 months of work down the drain because I couldn't convince a client that my ideas were worth their time." She laughed bitterly. "My boss probably spent the evening updating my job description if I still have one tomorrow." "What kind of presentation?" James leaned forward slightly, his attention entirely focused on her words rather than his phone or the arrivals board like most people would be. "Rebranding campaign for a restaurant chain called Harvest Kitchen." They wanted something fresh and modern, but every concept I showed them felt, I don't know, hollow. Like I was just throwing trendy words and colors together without any real meaning behind them. Nina surprised herself with how easily the words came. She'd been holding this frustration inside all day. James nodded thoughtfully. You know, when I was in paramedic training, I had this instructor who always said that the worst mistakes happen when you stop seeing the person behind the emergency. Maybe your presentation felt hollow because you were focused on what you thought they wanted, instead of what would actually help them connect with their customers. The observation struck Nina like a small revelation. You might be right. I was so worried about impressing them with flashy design trends that I forgot to ask what Harvest Kitchen actually meant to the families eating there. Exactly, James said, his eyes brightening. When someone calls 911, they're not looking for the most sophisticated medical technique. They want to feel like someone cares about getting them through their worst moment. Maybe your restaurant clients want their customers to feel the same way about their meals. The announcement crackled over the intercom, barely intelligible through the static. But they caught enough to understand the night bus would be delayed another 20 minutes. Instead of groaning, Nina felt a small surge of relief. Tell me about the worst day you've had at work, she said, settling back against the bench. And don't say you don't have them, everyone has them. James was quiet for a moment, his expression growing serious. 3 months ago, we got called to a house fire. Family of 4 trapped on the 2nd floor. We managed to get the parents and older daughter out, but... He paused, running a hand through his dark hair. We lost the little boy, 8 years old, Samuel. Nina felt her chest tighten. James, I'm so sorry. The thing is, we did everything right. Followed every protocol. Made every correct decision. Sometimes that's just not enough. His voice carried a weight that spoke of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. I almost quit that week. Started looking at office jobs, anything that didn't involve life and death decisions. But you stayed? I stayed because the next week we saved a teenager who'd overdosed at a party. Got her heart beating again. Watched her parents cry with relief in the hospital waiting room. That's the thing about this job. The saves have to outweigh the losses or you can't keep doing it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared vulnerability settling between them. Nina realized that in 30 minutes of conversation, she'd learned more about James's character than she'd discovered about some colleagues after months of working together. You know what's funny? Nina said eventually. I've lived in this city for 4 years and I don't think I've ever had a real conversation with a stranger before tonight. Everyone's always rushing somewhere, buried in their phones, keeping their distance. James smiled. Maybe that's what happens when you slow down long enough to actually see each other. The bus finally arrived with a wheeze of brakes and hydraulics. As they climbed aboard, Nina realized she didn't want this unexpected encounter to end. For the first time in months, she felt like someone had really listened to her, and more surprisingly, she'd found herself genuinely caring about someone else's struggles. The city lights blurred past the bus windows as they found seats together, their conversation continuing in hushed tones that felt intimate, despite the public setting. Coffee and courage. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the station, and Nina found herself taking the 6:15 p.m. train instead of her usual 5:30 departure, not because work demanded it, but because James finished his day shift at Mercy General around the same time, and somehow their paths had begun crossing with increasing frequency at Grand Central. What started as coincidental meetings had evolved into something neither of them quite named, but both quietly anticipated. James would appear with 2 cups of coffee from the decent cafe near the hospital entrance, a significant upgrade from the vending machine brew that had marked their first encounter. Nina would share updates about her work. The Henderson account had been salvaged after she'd redesigned their entire approach based on James's advice about connecting with real people rather than chasing trends. You're early today? Nina observed as she spotted James already seated on their usual bench, a brown paper bag beside him along with the customary coffee cups. Had a surprisingly quiet afternoon, he replied, standing to greet her with the easy familiarity they'd developed. Only 2 calls, both minor. Figured I'd try something new. He gestured to the bag with a slightly sheepish expression. Homemade sandwiches. My grandmother's recipe for Cubano sandwiches. Thought you might be tired of expensive salads from that place near your office. Nina felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. You made lunch for me? Well, dinner, technically. It's almost 7. James's confidence seemed to falter slightly. Unless you've already eaten or you don't like pork or... James. Nina placed her hand briefly on his arm, stopping his nervous rambling. This is incredibly thoughtful. Thank you. They unwrapped the sandwiches as the evening commuters flowed around them, creating their own small island of conversation in the midst of the station's constant motion. The sandwich was perfectly pressed, the flavors of ham, Swiss, pickles, and mustard creating a harmony that spoke of generations of family tradition. This is amazing, Nina said after her first bite. Your grandmother taught you to cook? She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, James explained matter-of-factly, though Nina caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested the pain never fully disappeared. Abuela Maria believed that feeding people was one of the highest forms of love. She'd make these enormous Sunday dinners for anyone who needed a place to belong. Nina set down her sandwich, suddenly understanding something deeper about the man beside her. Is that why you became a paramedic? Taking care of people? James considered this, his dark eyes thoughtful. Maybe. She used to say that everyone deserves someone who shows up when they need help most. I guess that stuck with me. He paused, then added with a slight smile. Though she probably would have preferred I become a doctor. Better job security and more respectable dinner party conversations. Dinner parties are overrated, Nina said firmly. Trust me, I've been to plenty of them with my marketing crowd. Everyone trying to impress everyone else with their latest campaign successes or client acquisitions. It's exhausting pretending to care about who landed which account. Is that why you seemed so defeated that night we met? Not just the failed presentation, but the whole environment? Nina nodded slowly. I moved here thinking the city would be this amazing place where creative people collaborated and pushed boundaries. Instead, I found an industry obsessed with billing hours and profit margins. That night after the Henderson disaster, I was seriously considering moving back to Ohio and helping my dad run his hardware store. What changed your mind? She looked at him directly, feeling a flutter of nervousness at her own honesty. Meeting someone who reminded me that work can be about more than just personal success. Watching you talk about your patients, seeing how much you genuinely care about helping people. It made me want to find that same sense of purpose in my own career. James's expression softened. Nina, can I ask you something? Of course. Would you maybe want to have dinner sometime? Actual dinner? At a real restaurant with tablecloths and everything? His voice carried a vulnerability that made her heart skip. I mean, if you're interested. No pressure. Nina felt herself smiling before she'd even processed her answer. I would love that, James. As they finished their sandwiches and prepared for their respective buses, Nina realized that somewhere between terrible vending machine coffee and homemade cubanos, she'd begun looking forward to more than just their evening conversations. She'd begun looking forward to discovering what else they might build together. The platform felt different now, less like a place where people waited to leave, and more like the spot where something beautiful had begun to grow. Building something beautiful. 6 months of dinner dates had woven themselves into something neither Nina nor James had quite expected when they'd first shared terrible coffee on that lonely platform. Their relationship had grown with the steady confidence of two people who'd learned to trust each other through countless small moments. James bringing Nina soup when she caught the flu, Nina surprising him with tickets to a baseball game after he'd mentioned missing the sport from his childhood. On a rainy Thursday evening in April, Nina sat in the passenger seat of James's Honda Civic, watching him navigate through downtown traffic with the same calm focus he brought to everything else. They were heading to Mercy General, where she'd volunteered to help design new community outreach materials for the hospital's free clinic program. You sure you're ready for this? James asked as they pulled into the hospital parking garage. It can be pretty intense even just being in the building. Lots of sounds and smells that take getting used to. Nina squeezed his hand. I want to understand this part of your world. Besides, if I can handle client presentations with entitled restaurant executives, I think I can manage a hospital meeting. The emergency department buzzed with controlled chaos. Monitors beeping. Staff moving with purposeful urgency. Families clustered in waiting areas with expressions ranging from worry to exhaustion. Nina found herself impressed by how James transformed the moment they entered his workplace. His posture straightening, his attention sharpening as colleagues called out greetings and updates. Rivera, thank God you're here early, called a woman in scrubs approaching with a tablet in her hands. We've got a multi-car accident coming in, ETA 5 minutes. You're on trauma too. James glanced at Nina apologetically. I'm so sorry, the meeting will have to go, Nina said firmly. People need you. I'll wait. She watched him disappear into the organized chaos, marveling at how naturally he'd shifted into emergency mode. A nurse named Patricia, noticing Nina standing uncertainly near the entrance, approached with a kind smile. "You must be Nina," Patricia said. "James talks about you constantly. Want me to show you to the conference room? Dr. Martinez is excited to meet the marketing genius who's going to help us reach more people in the community." The meeting with Dr. Martinez and the clinic staff revealed a world Nina had never fully considered. Families choosing between medication and groceries. Elderly patients skipping treatments they couldn't afford. Children missing school because their parents couldn't take time off work for medical appointments. "Our current outreach materials look like tax documents," Dr. Martinez admitted, sliding a stack of dense text-heavy flyers across the table. "We know there are people who need our services but don't realize we offer them for free or on sliding scale payments. We just don't know how to reach them." Nina studied the materials, her mind already racing with possibilities. What if instead of listing services we told stories? Real patients who found help here, shown in ways that feel approachable rather than clinical? For the next 2 hours, Nina found herself energized in a way she hadn't felt since her early days in marketing. This wasn't about selling luxury or convincing people they needed something they didn't. This was about connecting essential resources with people who desperately needed them. When James finally appeared in the conference room, his scrubs slightly rumpled and exhaustion evident in his shoulders, Nina was deep in conversation with the staff about photography locations and community partnerships. "How'd it go in trauma?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Good save," James replied simply, then looked at Nina with curiosity. "Looks like things went well here too?" "Your girlfriend is going to revolutionize how we do community outreach," Patricia announced. "She's already got 3 local churches interested in hosting information sessions, and her idea for the patient story campaign is brilliant." Driving home later that evening, Nina felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. "Thank you for bringing me into this," she said to James. "I feel like I'm actually going to make a difference for the first time in my career." James reached over and took her hand. "You've been making a difference for months. You just needed to find the right place to channel it." He paused, then added quietly, "Nina, I love you." The words hung in the space between them, simple and honest. Nina felt her heart expand with a certainty that surprised her with its clarity. "I love you too," she replied, meaning it completely. As they sat at a red light, Nina realized that missing that train had led her not just to love, but to a version of herself she'd never known existed. Someone who could use her talents to serve something larger than profit margins and brand recognition. Full circle. 2 years later, Nina stood at the exact spot on Platform 7 where she'd first sat in defeat, but this time her heart raced with anticipation rather than despair. The Grand Central Metro station looked the same. Harsh fluorescent lights, concrete benches, the eternal hum of late-night city life, but everything felt transformed by the memories layered into this space. James had asked her to meet him here at 11:30 p.m., claiming he had a surprise related to their anniversary of missing trains, as they'd come to call it. Nina smiled at the memory of their friends' reactions when they'd first explained how they met. Only you two would turn a transportation failure into a romantic origin story. Her best friend Claire had laughed. The community clinic project had evolved beyond anything Nina had imagined. What started as redesigned flyers had grown into a comprehensive outreach program that connected Mercy General with 12 neighborhood organizations. Nina had eventually left Morrison and Associates to freelance, specializing in nonprofit marketing, her client roster filled with organizations that matched her values rather than her bank account. "Excuse me, miss," a familiar voice said behind her. "You look like you might have missed your train." Nina turned to find James approaching with 2 cups of coffee and the same warm smile that had first put her at ease. But tonight something was different, a nervous energy in his movements, an unusual formality in his tone. "Why, yes, I did," Nina played along. "Terrible luck, really. Though I hear sometimes good things happen to people who miss their trains." "I've heard that too," James said, settling beside her on the bench just as he had that first night. "In fact, I know someone who claims that missing a train was the best thing that ever happened to her." "Smart woman," Nina grinned. "Sounds like she knew how to make the most of an unexpected situation." James set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. "Nina Carter, 2 years ago, you were sitting right here thinking your life was falling apart. You thought you'd failed at everything that mattered. His voice carried the same gentle certainty that had first drawn her to him. But I saw something different. I saw someone who cared so much about doing meaningful work that a single setback devastated her. I saw someone brave enough to trust a stranger with terrible coffee and honest conversation. Nina's breath caught as James reached into his jacket pocket. You've taught me that love isn't just about showing up for someone during emergencies, he continued, pulling out a small velvet box. It's about choosing each other every ordinary day, about building something beautiful, together even when the world feels chaotic. He opened the box to reveal a simple, solitaire ring that caught the harsh station lights and transformed them into something magical. Nina, will you marry me? Will you keep missing trains with me for the rest of our lives? Tears blurred Nina's vision as she looked at the man who had appeared when she needed hope most, who had helped her discover not just love, but purpose. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, absolutely yes. As James slipped the ring onto her finger, the small crowd of late-night commuters who had gathered to watch broke into applause. An elderly man called out, "About time, son," while a group of college students cheered as if their team had just won a championship. 14 months later, Nina adjusted her grandmother's vintage lace veil in the bridal suite at Riverside Community Center. Through the window, she could see guests gathering in the garden, including many of the clinic patients whose lives had been touched by her outreach work. Dr. Martinez was serving as one of James's groomsmen, while Patricia had insisted on doing Nina's makeup as her contribution to the celebration. During the reception, James's best man told the story of their meeting to the assembled crowd, ending with, "So remember, folks, next time you're running late, slow down. You never know who might be waiting for you." As the evening wound down, Nina noticed a young woman sitting alone at the bus stop outside the community center, looking lost and overwhelmed. Without hesitation, Nina gathered up her wedding dress and approached, James following instinctively. "Are you all right?" Nina asked gently. "You look like you might be having a rough night." The woman looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "I just got evicted from my apartment. Missed the last bus to my sister's place. Don't really know what to do now." Nina and James exchanged a knowing glance. "There's a coffee shop that stays open all night about 2 blocks from here," James offered. "Want us to walk you over?" Sometimes when everything feels impossible, a hot drink and some company can help you figure out the next step. As they walked through the quiet streets, Nina's wedding dress trailing behind them like a beacon of hope, she realized that their story was never really about missing a train. It was about remaining open to the possibility that life's unexpected detours might lead to exactly where you need to be. The circle was complete, but the story continued. 2 people who had found each other in a moment of need, now offering the same kindness to someone else whose journey was just beginning.